Welcome to Rewatch-and-Rank. On this channel, we rewatch older TV shows, provide a summary and opinion on the episode before ranking each episode against each other. Today's episode is Grey's Anatomy Season 2, Episode 9, Thanks for the Memories. The episode in a nutshell is just a brief summary of what happened within this episode. So as always in the summary, we'll summarize the notable patients and then move into any personal dramas that may have occurred. So the first was not really a patient, but Bailey picked up the Thanksgiving shift so that she can get more surgery practice before she goes on her maternity leave, as she's now pregnant. And she tells Meredith how much she loves Thanksgiving because the forced proximity to family, with the addition of alcohol and the stress of preparing a dinner and being on best behaviors, can lead to a lot of surgeries, either people being stupid with the cooking of the meal or tensions running high. And Meredith volunteered for the shift because she doesn't think that she's happy enough to not ruin the Thanksgiving dinner for everybody else. There is, because it's the holiday, a temporary doctor who is subbing in from a different hospital who basically tells Bailey that the only resident he's interested in dealing with that day is the one that they call the Nazi, which of course was Bailey's nickname, and that, and he keeps saying him, he wants to work with him, let him know if he can find him, and Bailey decides to not reveal that it's actually her nickname, and she performs surgery and kind of puts him off throughout the day before, as they're leaving the hospital, Richard calls after her that that's why they call her by her nickname when she scolds him for not going home, and the doctor realizes the mistake he made all day. She was the one he wanted to work with, and he ruined that first meeting because he couldn't conceive of the possibility that it was a woman that was referred to. So that was that. Richard, of course, as mentioned, was supposed to be off, supposed to be at home with Adele, did not go home all day, and at the end of the episode still hadn't gone home because Adele was already angry at him, so what's he going to do with that? Christina, after getting tired of watching Thanksgiving dinner be prepared, she basically says she's going out for liquor but goes to the hospital and she removes a wishbone from a patient's throat because they swallowed the whole wishbone, which is honestly impressive because I've seen the size of a turkey wishbone. Like, to swallow that whole, you can't be chewing your food. Anywho, beyond that, we then also had George's father as a patient. Um, Basically, in the morning, George's father and brothers pick him up to go hunt a turkey with them, which is a family tradition. George is the odd man out among his family, who are more rough and tumble than he is. And basically, at the end of the day, he shoots the turkey, goes to bring it home. His brothers want to salute him for finally killing a turkey and becoming a man. And they end up firing off their guns, which ends up hitting their father in the behind. And so they have to go to the hospital. And George operates on his father's behind to remove all of the buckshot from his gluteus maximus, as George called it, and they then managed to have a heart-to-heart about, how everybody knows that George is different from the family, but that they try so hard to include him, and it's not them thinking George is stupid, but actually the other way around, which George then realizes is true and basically offers a bit of an olive branch to his father, which shows some growth with their relationship. And then we have the big story of it. This episode is, of course, Meredith. She's dealing with a coma patient who had fallen out of the bed while they were turning him over to prevent bed sores, and due to the insurance, they have to check him. He opens his eyes, looks at her, she realizes that something more may be going on. She finds Derek, who also was supposed to have the day off but came in anyways. And he basically does the double checking with Meredith, who goes to him for a consultation. They realize that he wasn't actually in a coma but minimally conscious and that they may be able to wake him up. So they do wake him up. However, it turns out that because it's been 16 years, his family, his son, and his wife have already moved on. There's another man in his place, and basically they leave before he wakes up because they don't want to meet him. Then once he's woken up, he's of course given the news that it's been 16 years, and then they also take him to an MRI where it is discovered that he has a brain bleed, and they can either operate on it or he will pass on from it. His son comes to see him, but obviously it's been 16 years. He went into a coma when his son was 1 year old. They don't know each other very well, and the son immediately leaves. This makes him hopeless, so he decides to go ahead with the operation. And then he passes on during the operation, which gives the family closure, and Derek tells the son. And then Meredith goes to a bar at the end of the episode where she is finally starting to move on from Derek and allows another man to sit next to her and buy her a drink. Then we have the Thanksgiving subplot where Izzy is deciding to make Thanksgiving dinner for all of the interns, but everybody keeps leaving. Joe and his boyfriend Walter come over, as well as Christina and Burke. Burke's mother is revealed to own a restaurant in Alabama, and so he is very skilled in cooking, and Izzy, who is more of a baker than a cook, follows his instructions while they cook dinner. But eventually, Joe and Walter have to leave because they have to open the bar before everybody else arrives. But at the very end, Alex, George, and Christina do arrive late and enjoy the turkey dinner that was made with Izzy and Burke. And then last but not least, we have the Derek and Addison. Because they were supposed to have the day off, they plan to have a picnic and potentially try intimacy again in their relationship now that they've been trying to work on their relationship for some time. Addison suggests re-adding in the um, physical element to their relationship, like pulling off a band-aid to try it again. However, then of course Derek ends up caught up with his case, Mr. Holden's case, the entire day, which then means that he stands Addison up. However, at the end, after the case, Meredith basically tells him that she knows he doesn't know what he wants, but that he wouldn't be him if he wasn't trying, before she says goodbye to him and leaves. And he then basically shows up late to the trailer. At night, Addison's sitting there, asks him if he's done trying to hurt her back yet, because if he isn't, then she's going to have to get a thicker skin. And we then get the implication that he says there's no anesthesia in sight, and that implies, of course, that they are going to move on with that physical intimacy in their relationship, though that's not shown on screen. And that was this episode. So now that we've been reminded about what happens, it's time to rank the episode. As always, we'll rank on our two lists, the mostly objective ranking list, followed by the personal ranking list. So we'll start with our mostly objective rank values. And our first value is, of course, the introduction of George's family, which is +2 each for his brothers Jerry and Ronnie and his father Harold O'Malley. We then have our supporting relationship development, also worth 2 more points. And this was, of course, to do with Derek and Addison. At the start of the episode, they make a date. And then by the end of the episode, Derek shows up. And the implication is that they are re-adding physical intimacy into the relationship that they are trying to work on after everything that happened in New York and with Meredith and Mark. Kind of pairing up with this, I'm going to skip ahead to a negative, which is, of course, the supporting relationship regression or breakup. And that is because between those two positives for the relationship, Addison was stood up during the day. She waited for Derek. She had a picnic basket there. She sat on the bench, and he did not show up for her. And that's obviously a regression, so that was -2, which does cancel each other out. We then had a minor successful emotional impact, which is, of course, the tragedy that is Mr. Holden. He spends 16 years in a nursing home, in a coma, and only after he's accidentally injured by the nursing home staff, who obviously aren't as well trained as hospital staff, do they realize that the entire time he was minimally conscious, not actually in a coma, like a full coma, and he could have been woken up probably sooner. But now that they've noticed it, they administer the medications that will allow him to wake up. And then upon waking up, he finds out that not only has he missed his very young child's entire life pretty much, it's been 16 years in a coma, his son's 17, so that implies, of course, that his child was only 1 year old when he went into the coma. He's missed his child's entire life. His wife has moved on, married someone else, so they're expecting a baby. And even like the son doesn't really even want to know him, which honestly, I didn't like that aspect of it because it's like you would think if it really took his mom that long to move on and he was so young, she probably would have said information about his father. Like he would have known stories about his father. He would have known that he was injured in the course of putting out a fire as a firefighter, helping people, saving people, like all around a very good person. So even though it was 16 years, I can understand you don't have a strong emotional attachment or bond, but wouldn't you want to try to build one with that kind of person? Like, wouldn't you, like, people have fathers, stepfathers, in-law fathers, like, you can have different types of fatherly relationships. Maybe you'll never have, like, a father-son bond that's strong that you would have had otherwise, but you can still attempt to create some sort of bond, but the son doesn't even try, which makes Mr. Holden hopeless about, the future, and so he decides to take the risky operation that could end up killing him, which ultimately, unfortunately, did end up killing him. So essentially, he basically spent 16 years in a coma, woke up, found out his family moved on, didn't really want anything to do with him so much anymore, decided then, because obviously nobody wants him around, might as well, you know, take this surgery. If it's successful, I'll have to build a new life. If it's not, then he gets eternal rest, essentially. And then, of course, ends up dying. So that to me is very tragic. That hit me in the feels. So ultimately successful. Though I didn't like have any sort of like I wasn't crying or anything like that, so it was a minor successful emotional impact because I felt it, but not super strongly. So that's worth 4 points, or sorry, 3 points. My bad. Worth 3 points. And then we have our multi-season main character development. We learn about Burke's mother being a restaurant owner in Alabama, and that is how he learned how to cook, as well as George. We meet his family. We learn that he's the odd one out in his family. One of his brothers is a dry cleaner, the other brother works as a postman, and then the father drives a truck. They're into hunting, they're into cars, they all share common interests, and George is really the only one who doesn't share those interests. And the entire day that they go out hunting, there's obviously a bad attitude there, especially from George, who just doesn't want to be a part of anything. He ends up killing the turkey only so that he can go home. He thinks all of the tradition is terrible and horrible. And then when they get to the hospital, he scolds his brothers for, you know, always wanting to pick cars and how they always pick the same cars in the same order. And he storms out. When he comes back in the room, his brothers have gone to the cafeteria, and he and his father manage to have a heart to heart about how, George accused them of treating him like he was stupid, But his father says it's not that they're treating them like he's stupid, it's just that they know he isn't really into the same things they are, but they don't really have any idea how to be interested in the things that he's interested in, because obviously it's a lot easier to learn about cars than it is like the entire medical field, which they are not doctors, so they can't really have conversations about that. And that the dad only wants him to try, that they do everything they can to include him, and it's not them treating George like he's stupid, it's the opposite, where George looks down on them and treats them like they're stupid because they're more into trades and such rather than a highly academic field. And so George kind of comes to that realization, and so he offers an olive branch to his dad, talking about the surgery that he had performed in the elevator. And the dad, of course, thinks that it's awesome, and then reiterates once again, like, would it kill him to every so often just pick a car to humor the family type thing. So there's that whole saga. And that is our final positive, bringing us to a 13 out of 10 score. However, we do have one additional negative, which is worth a minus 2 points. And that is, well, to be honest, to me, there's two negative messaging or behaviors, and I am going to actually count them separately because they're very different. In it, the first one, of course, is that when you make a commitment to be at an event with somebody, you should show up. I felt that it was incredibly rude of pretty much all of the characters to have made these plans with Izzy, confirmed these plans with Izzy, and then gone ahead and basically abandoned her until really late in the night where they finally managed to show up. Meredith never ended up showing up, but she had a genuine shift. She was the one who actually was supposed to be working that day, so that to me is reasonable. But, like, George left with his family. He got dragged away, so again, somewhat reasonable, though he did wait pretty long to actually show up. Christina abandoned them halfway through to go remove a wishbone from somebody's throat. Alex, because he's still insecure about failing the tests, decided to skip out on the Thanksgiving because he didn't want Izzy to know. However, thanks to some encouragement from Meredith while they're waiting for Mr. Holden to wake up, he does ultimately decide to go, but also doesn't end up going until very late after even Christina and George show up. And then there's like Richard blowing off his wife and their holiday plans so that he can be at the hospital. Derek standing up Addison. So there's a lot of inability to keep commitments, which is just rude behavior. And again, if you have if you know in advance that you're taking a shift or that you're not going to be there, as long as you let them know in advance, that to me isn't a big deal because they knew in advance. But to stand somebody up or to break a commitment without any word, that to me is incredibly rude. And that is very negative behavior. The other one, of course, is the temporary doctor being incredibly disdainful and rude towards Bailey because he assumes that a woman, especially a smaller woman, could not ever be this fabled great surgeon resident that he wants to work with, and basically loses the opportunity to do so. But it's more the fact that he couldn't even conceive of the possibility that it could be her, it could be Bailey that he wants to work with. That rubbed me the wrong way. I don't know if it was because she was female or because she was shorter or because she was being friendly to him when they met, but it rubbed me the wrong way because it's like you know them by a nickname, not their real name. So in that case, any resident could be that resident. Maybe you should confirm who they are first before you go insulting people and saying you don't need them because they're not themselves, essentially. Anyways, I thought that was in very poor taste as well. And that is why this episode then comes to, with all of that being considered, a 9 out of 10 episode. And so in our season 2 rankings so far, on the mostly objective list, we have in first place Make Me Lose Control, Into You Like a Train, Deny, Deny, Deny. This episode, Thanks for the Memories, comes in fourth, and then we have Enough is Enough, Something to Talk About, Let It Be, Bring the Pain, and in ninth, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head. So now we come to my personal ranking, and I won't bore you with the repetition of everything and all the opinions that I already expressed on the mostly objective ranking. The only new things that I wanted to add were really the comedic aspects of the episode. On the one hand, when Burke is helping Izzy to make the meal, he is helping her in the same way that he would be instructing within a surgery, which is, again, quite funny. And I do like the way that that occurred because it allows them to interact in their personal life in a way that is comfortable and familiar, which I really liked. And then just the oddness of poor George being dragged out into the wilderness to hunt a turkey by his, more blue collar family and, just being done with everything. And obviously, it's very different than the character that he portrays, as he is not portrayed as anybody who would be interested in hunting or athletically inclined at all. There's also a scene after he manages to shoot the turkey just so that he can get them to leave so he can go back home, where his dad, like, puts the turkey's blood onto his cheeks, and, like, the look on George's face there was also very amusing to me. Which the comedic aspect didn't really fit in the other, but otherwise everything else applies, nothing new to add there. I didn't think that it was the worst episode ever. I didn't think it was the best episode either. I thought it was above average for sure. And so I decided to rank it a 7 out of 10 because there were some negatives, but ultimately a very strong episode. That brings our personal ranking so far to, in first place, Make Me Lose Control, second, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head, Something to Talk About, Into You Like a Train, Deny, 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 Let It Be. This episode came in seventh, Thanks for the Memories, Enough is Enough, and in last place we have Bring the Pain. And so we come to our series rankings so far, and on the mostly objective side, Season 1 ended with a score of 77.78%, and Season 2 has so far earned 72 points out of a possible 270. On the personal side, Season 1 ended with 66.67%, and Season 2 so far has a total score of 70 out of a maximum possible 270. With that, we've now rewatched and ranked Grey's Anatomy Season 2, Episode 9, Thanks for the Memories. Like and subscribe if you'd like to, and I'll see you in the next episode.